The city lights of Seattle blurred behind sheets of rain, each droplet catching the glow of the penthouse windows 40 stories below. Sophia Mitchell stood at the floor-to-ceiling glass, champagne flute trembling in her hand, the liquid gold sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Her reflection stared back, a stranger in a sapphire evening gown worth more than most people's monthly rent, diamond earrings catching the light like tiny stars, hair swept into an elegant twist that had taken her stylist 90 minutes to perfect. Her phone buzzed for the 15th time in an hour. Derek's name flashed across the screen. She didn't need to read the messages to know what they said. The same rehearsed concern, the same calculated urgency, the same unspoken threat buried beneath layers of corporate speak and false tenderness. The words from earlier tonight still echoed in her skull, ricocheting between her temples like bullets she couldn't dodge. Success tastes like champagne and feels like drowning. She'd whispered them to herself in the bathroom at the Four Seasons, mascara running, hands gripping the marble counter until her knuckles turned white. Her phone vibrated again, this time a text from Sarah, her assistant. "Miss Mitchell, board members asking questions. Need you to respond. Urgent." Sophia hurled the champagne flute across the room. Crystal exploded against the far wall, golden liquid streaming down the white paint like tears the penthouse refused to shed. The sound felt good. Honest. Real in a way nothing else in her life had been for longer than she could remember. She grabbed her clutch, kicked off her Louboutins, and walked barefoot out of the apartment that had never once felt like home. 6 hours earlier, the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons had sparkled with the kind of orchestrated perfection Sophia had built her reputation creating. 300 guests in evening wear, crystal chandeliers refracting light across tables draped in midnight blue silk, centerpieces of white orchids flown in from Thailand that morning. The Spring Charity Gala was Bennett Events' flagship showcase, the night where Seattle's elite gathered to see and be seen, to write checks that would absolve them of guilt for another year. Sophia moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her smile a weapon she'd sharpened over a decade of corporate warfare. She paused at each table, remembered names and spouses and children, asked about recent vacations and pending deals. Every word calculated, every gesture choreographed. This was her domain, her kingdom built from nothing but ambition and 18-hour days and the willingness to sacrifice everything that made life worth living. The tech CEO, who'd launched 3 startups, air-kissed both her cheeks. "Sophia, darling, this event is spectacular. You've outdone yourself." She accepted the compliment with a modest nod, already cataloging the 2 empty seats at his table, the slightly wilted centerpiece that would need replacing before photos, the server who'd fumbled a wine pour 3 tables over. Excellence wasn't about what went right. It was about identifying what could go wrong and eliminating it before anyone else noticed. Derek materialized at her elbow, his hand possessive on the small of her back. He looked perfect, as always. Armani tuxedo tailored to emphasize his athletic build, dark hair swept back, smile practiced in mirrors until it appeared genuine. "Ready for the main event?" Something cold slithered down her spine. "What main event? The auction doesn't start for another hour." His smile widened, and in that moment she saw it. The predator beneath the polish, the calculation that had drawn her to him 2 years ago, and now made her want to run. "Trust me. You're going to love this." Before she could respond, he was striding toward the stage, microphone in hand, feedback squealing briefly before the sound system compensated. The room quieted, 300 faces turning toward him with the attentive expectation of an audience that had paid $5,000 a plate. "Good evening, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this spectacular event that my incredibly talented fiancé has created." Polite applause. Sophia's stomach clenched. "I have a wonderful announcement to make tonight, and I couldn't think of a better audience to share it with. As many of you know, Sophia and I have been together for 2 years. She's brilliant, driven, absolutely unstoppable when she sets her mind to something." Her face froze in a smile that felt like rigor mortis. This wasn't happening. They discussed this. She'd been explicit about wanting privacy, about waiting until after the merger, about needing time to... Which is why I'm thrilled to announce that Sophia and I are getting married this October. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Guests rose from their seats, champagne glasses raised in toast. The spotlight swung to find her in the crowd, and she felt every eye in the room lock onto her face, waiting for the joy, the tears, the gratitude that a woman was supposed to display when a man claimed her in front of 300 witnesses. She lifted her hand in a small wave, smile locked in place even as her other hand gripped her clutch so tightly the beading cut into her palm. October. 4 months away. He'd chosen a date, booked a venue, probably the same ballroom they stood in now, arranged their future like a corporate merger without a single conversation about what she wanted. Because what she wanted had never been part of the equation. The memory surfaced unbidden, sharp as broken glass. Age 8, standing in her parents' study while they argued over a partnership case. Her birthday cake sat forgotten in the kitchen, 9 candles waiting to be lit. Her mother had glanced at her once, irritation flickering across her face at the interruption. "Sophia, go to your room. Adults are talking." Later, much later, her mother had found her crying into her pillow. Instead of comfort, she'd received instruction. "Marriage is a business contract, darling. Love is for fools who can't afford better. Remember that." She'd remembered, built a life around that principle, and now, standing in a ballroom full of people who believed they knew her, she understood with perfect clarity that she'd become exactly what her mother had been: successful, respected, and utterly, devastatingly alone. The backstage area smelled of expensive perfume and barely suppressed panic. Sophia shoved through the curtain, Derek close behind, his hand reaching for her elbow. She spun to face him, and whatever he saw in her expression made him take a step back. What the hell was that? His confusion looked genuine, which somehow made it worse. "What do you mean? I thought you'd be happy. Everyone loved it." "Everyone except the one person whose opinion actually matters." Her voice came out low, dangerous. "We talked about this, Derek. I specifically said I didn't want a public announcement until after the merger closed." "The merger needs this." His tone shifted, businessman replacing boyfriend. "My father flew in from Boston specifically for tonight. He's in the audience. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, Sophia. 3 months, maybe 4. He needs to see this deal secured before he dies." The words tasted bitter. "So this is about him." "About the merger. About making sure all the pieces are properly aligned before you inherit." Derek's jaw tightened. "Don't make this ugly. You knew what we were building together. Bennett Events and Morrison Capital, it's a perfect synergy. Your company gets the capital injection it needs, my firm gets a foothold in the experiential economy. Win-win. And where do I fit in that spreadsheet? Line item 17? Miscellaneous assets?" "You're being dramatic," she laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. "I've spent 2 years being whatever you needed me to be. The perfect girlfriend at investor dinners, the charming fiancé at your father's birthday party, the ambitious CEO who's grateful for your firm's guidance. But I never agreed to be your prop in a public performance." "Guidance?" His voice hardened. "Is that what you call saving your company from bankruptcy? Because that's where Bennett Events was headed when we met. Your books were a disaster, Sophia. 6 months from insolvency. I gave you a lifeline and you took it. Don't rewrite history now that it's convenient." The accusation stung because it carried truth. She had been drowning when they met, drowning in debt and bad decisions, and the crushing weight of trying to build an empire with nothing but ambition and maxed-out credit cards. He'd offered rescue, and she'd grabbed it with both hands, too desperate to examine the terms buried in the fine print. "I'm tired of waiting for your perfect moment." Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice to the intimate register he used when closing deals. "You're never ready, Sophia. There's always another reason to wait, another milestone to hit, another quarter to close. My father is dying. We need this merger finalized. The announcement moves the timeline forward, puts pressure on the board to approve. That's strategy, not betrayal. She thought about the board meeting scheduled for Monday. 8 members who'd been increasingly vocal about her leadership style, her refusal to scale faster, her insistence on maintaining creative control over projects. Derek's firm owned 35% of Bennett Events through carefully structured investments. If he pushed for a vote of no confidence, if he painted her as unstable or uncommitted, he might have the leverage to force her out of the company she'd built from nothing. The realization settled over her like ice water. This wasn't a proposal. It was a hostile takeover wrapped in white tulle and promises. I need air. She turned toward the exit, but Derek's hand clamped around her wrist. Not painful, but firm. A warning disguised as affection. Sophia, don't do this. Not here, not now. Every investor we need is in that room. Your board members are watching. You walk out, you confirm every doubt they've been whispering about. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, at the 4-carat diamond engagement ring he'd given her 6 months ago during a carefully orchestrated proposal at Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant. He'd made sure the press was tipped off, made sure the proposal happened where half of Seattle's tech elite could witness and applaud. She'd said yes because saying no in front of 100 strangers felt impossible, because she'd convinced herself that love could be built on mutual respect and shared ambition, because she was 32 and tired and terrified that this was the best offer she'd ever receive. But looking at his hand on her wrist now, feeling the pressure just shy of pain, she understood what she'd been too desperate to see before. Derek didn't love her. He loved the idea of her, the successful CEO, the beautiful accessory, the strategic asset. He loved what she could do for his portfolio, his reputation, his dying father's approval. And she'd almost let him make her complicit in her own erasure. Sophia twisted her wrist free, the motion sharp enough to make Derek stumble back. Don't ever grab me like that again. She didn't wait for his response, didn't wait to see the shock or anger or calculation that would flicker across his face as he recalibrated his approach. She grabbed her clutch and walked toward the exit, spine straight, head high, every step a declaration of war. Behind her, Derek's voice carried a warning she'd heard before in boardrooms and negotiations, the tone of a man who always got what he wanted. You walk out that door, Sophia, and there will be consequences. I promise you that. She pushed through the door into the April rain without looking back. The first bar was 3 blocks from the Four Seasons, a dimly lit place where tech workers went to complain about their 6-figure salaries over craft cocktails. Sophia slid onto a leather bar stool, dress clinging to her skin from the rain, mascara probably running, hair falling in wet tangles from its careful arrangement. The bartender took one look at her and poured a double whiskey without asking. Rough night? She downed the whiskey in one burning swallow, feeling it scorch down her throat and settle like molten gold in her stomach. You could say that. The second bar was darker, louder, the kind of place where questions weren't asked, and nobody cared about evening gowns or broken heels or women drinking alone like they were trying to drown something that refused to die. Sophia ordered vodka this time, straight, no ice. The bartender was younger, more concerned. You okay, miss? Need me to call someone? I'm fine. The words came out sharp. Just pour. By the time she stumbled out of the second bar, the rain had intensified into a downpour that turned Seattle's streets into rivers. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Derek, Sarah, board members, clients, everyone demanding explanations she didn't have the energy to provide. She silenced it, shoved it into her clutch, and kept walking. She didn't know where she was going, didn't care. Each step took her further from the life she'd built with such careful precision, the reputation she'd crafted, the success she'd sacrificed everything to achieve. The rain felt good, honest, like the sky was crying the tears she refused to shed. Her heel caught on uneven pavement and snapped. Sophia went down hard, palms scraping concrete, sapphire dress blooming with street water. She knelt there for a moment, rain pounding her back. and felt the laugh bubble up from some deep well she'd kept sealed for years. It came out broken, edged with something that might have been hysteria, or might have been the first honest emotion she'd allowed herself in a decade. "Are you done feeling sorry for yourself?" The voice in her head sounded like her mother's, sharp with disapproval. "Get up. Mitchell women don't fall apart on street corners." But the voice was wrong. She wasn't falling apart. She was breaking open, and there was a difference. Breaking apart meant destruction. Breaking open meant possibility. Sophia tried to stand, but the combination of alcohol and broken heels and exhaustion made the simple act impossible. She slumped back against a storefront, rain streaming down her face, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she stopped fighting. The voices cut through the rain's percussion, a man's low rumble and a child's high chatter. Footsteps splashed closer. "Daddy, look!" The child's voice carried urgency. "That lady fell. She needs help." Sophia forced her eyes open. Through the rain-blurred world, she made out two figures, a tall man in a worn leather jacket and a small girl in a bright pink raincoat, both haloed by the streetlight's amber glow. The man hesitated. Sophia could read the calculation in his posture, the wariness of a father protecting his daughter from a stranger who might be dangerous or drunk, or both. Smart man. She was definitely both. "Please," the girl insisted, tugging at her father's hand. "Mommy was lost in the rain too, wasn't she, Daddy?" The man went still, so completely motionless that for a heartbeat, Sophia thought he'd left. Then he knelt beside his daughter, and Sophia saw his face. Strong features, dark skin, eyes that had seen too much but somehow remained kind. When he spoke, his voice carried the careful gentleness of someone who understood what it meant to be broken. "Some folks are put in our path for a reason, baby girl. Your mama taught Daddy that." He rose and crossed the street, approaching Sophia with the caution of someone who'd learned to assess danger in seconds. Up close, she could see the scars on his hands, the weathering at the corners of his eyes, the way his jacket hung on a frame built for harder labor than pushing papers across desks. "Ma'am, you're clearly having a rough night. Let me help you up." Sophia wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to leave, that she was fine, that she didn't need rescue from a stranger who probably had enough problems without adding a drunk CEO to the list. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, what emerged was something raw and true and utterly humiliating. "I don't know how to get up." It wasn't about the broken heel or the alcohol or the rain-slicked pavement. It was bigger than that, deeper than that. The admission that she'd built a life she didn't know how to escape from, had climbed so high she'd forgotten how to descend, had become so successful she'd lost track of what success was supposed to feel like. The man studied her for a long moment, rain plastering his dark hair to his skull, then extended his hand. "I'm James. That's my daughter Ava across the street. Can I call someone for you?" "My phone's dead." The lie came automatically, easier than explaining that her phone was very much alive, but every call on it represented someone who wanted something from her, who needed her to be someone she couldn't be anymore. "I can't remember where I was going." James glanced back at Ava, who watched from beneath the storefront awning with the solemn attention of a child who'd learned too young that the world could break people. Sophia saw something shift in his expression, the protective instinct warring with the desire to teach his daughter about compassion, about helping when helping was needed, even when it was inconvenient. "Look," he said finally, his voice matter-of-fact in a way that somehow made the humiliation bearable. "Our apartment is just a few blocks from here. You can dry off, call someone, figure out your next move. No pressure, no expectations." Sophia searched his face for ulterior motives and found none. Just exhaustion and kindness and the bone-deep weariness of a man who'd learned that sometimes survival meant accepting help from strangers. She nodded, unable to trust her voice, and accepted his hand. His grip was strong, calloused, the hand of someone who built things with his body rather than his words. He pulled her to her feet with surprising gentleness, steadying her when she wobbled, and guided her across the street to where Ava waited. The little girl's eyes widened as they approached. "Are you a princess? You look like the princess in my book." The question was so absurd, so perfectly childlike in its innocent assumption that beautiful dresses meant fairy tale lives, that Sophia felt the laugh escape before she could stop it. It came out brittle, edged with something that wasn't quite humor. "Hardly, just someone who made some poor choices tonight." James draped his jacket over her shoulders, the worn leather still warm from his body heat, smelling of sawdust and rain and something fundamentally decent. "Come on, let's get you somewhere dry." As they started walking, Ava slipped her small hand into Sophia's free one, chattering about her piano recital and how she'd played Twinkle Twinkle without any mistakes, and how her teacher said she had natural talent but needed to practice more. The child's voice washed over Sophia like a balm, requiring nothing but occasional murmurs of acknowledgement, demanding no performance or perfection or strategic calculation. James walked on her other side, silent but solid, his presence somehow both comforting and unsettling. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was. No pretense, no performance, just straightforward competence in navigating the rain-soaked streets of a neighborhood that bore no resemblance to Sophia's penthouse world. They turned a corner, and Ava's chatter paused mid-sentence. When she spoke again, her voice had gone soft, thoughtful in the way children sometimes are when connecting thoughts too big for their vocabulary. "Daddy, is this like that night with Mommy, when you found her in the rain?" James's stride hitched, barely perceptible, but Sophia felt it. The sudden tension in his shoulders, the carefully controlled breath, the weight of memory settling over him like a physical thing. "Yeah, Squirt. Good memory." Ava nodded, satisfied, and returned to her monologue about piano recitals. But the moment lingered, hanging in the rain-thick air between them. This man and his daughter, and the ghost of a woman who'd once been lost in a storm, and found. Sophia wondered what had happened to her, this mother whose memory could still make a strong man falter. Wondered if she'd been saved or lost, if finding her way home had meant survival or something more complicated. They reached a brick apartment building, 5 stories of worn facades and fire escapes, the kind of structure that had housed Seattle's working class for generations. James led them up the exterior stairs. No elevator, Sophia noted with a part of her brain that never stopped cataloging details, to the 3rd-floor landing, Unit 3B. The number was slightly crooked, probably knocked askew years ago and never quite straightened. James unlocked the door with a key that stuck briefly, requiring the practiced jiggle of someone who'd learned its particular quirks, and ushered them inside. The apartment welcomed them with warmth and the lingering scent of morning coffee and something woodsy that Sophia couldn't quite identify. Ava darted in immediately, shedding her raincoat with the practiced efficiency of a child who knew exactly where everything belonged. "Shoes by the door," James called after her, his tone carrying the kind of gentle authority that came from repetition rather than anger. He turned to Sophia, seeming to really see her for the first time under the apartment's lighting, soaked evening gown, ruined makeup, bare feet cut from walking blocks in broken heels. "It's not much," he said, hanging his jacket on a hook by the door. "But it's home." Sophia looked around, her executive brain automatically cataloging the space, even as exhaustion pulled at her limbs. The main room served multiple functions: living area with a worn but clean couch, dining space with a sturdy wooden table that showed signs of careful craftsmanship, galley kitchen visible through an archway. The furniture didn't match, collected over time rather than purchased as sets, but everything was clean, organized, cared for with the attention of someone who understood that taking care of things was how you made them last. What struck her most forcefully was the life embedded in every surface. Pencil marks tracked Ava's height along one wall, each line dated in careful handwriting. The bookshelf held an eclectic mix: carpentry manuals, children's stories, well-thumbed paperback novels. Above a small electric fireplace, framed photographs told the story this apartment held. James in firefighter uniform, Ava as a toddler, a beautiful woman with warm eyes and Ava's same bright smile. Rebecca. The name appeared in one of the photographs, written in the corner with the same careful hand that had marked Ava's height. Rebecca, 30th birthday. Sophia did the math automatically. If the photo was 3 years old, if she died then, she would have been 30 when the picture was taken. Young. Too young. Bathroom's first door on the left. James's voice pulled her back to the present. He held out a bundle of clothes, gray sweatpants and a flannel shirt, both well worn, both carrying that same woodsy scent she'd noticed earlier. These might be big on you, but they're dry. Take your time. Sophia accepted the bundle, her fingers brushing his in the exchange. His hands were rougher than any she'd held before, marked with the evidence of physical labor, calluses, scars, the kind of hands that built things instead of just talking about building them. She wondered what Derek's hands would look like next to these. Smooth, soft, manicured. The hands of someone who'd never built anything that couldn't be constructed with money and other people's labor. The bathroom was small, functional, revealing more about the life being lived in this apartment than any formal introduction could provide. A step stool by the sink for Ava to reach, shower curtain featuring cartoon sea creatures, medicine cabinet containing basic first aid supplies, children's vitamins, and a prescription bottle labeled for James. Take as needed for pain. Sophia caught her reflection in the mirror above the sink and barely recognized the woman staring back. Mascara streaked down her cheeks in dark rivers. Hair plastered to her skull, expensive styling completely destroyed. The sapphire dress clung to her frame, spectacular and ruined. A costume from a performance she'd finally walked off stage from. She peeled off the wet dress with some difficulty, the fabric clinging stubbornly, and let it fall to the floor in a sodden heap. Without the armor of designer clothes and perfect makeup, she looked younger, vulnerable. More like the girl she'd been at 22, armed with nothing but ambition and the desperate need to prove that she was worth more than her parents' cold assessment. The sweatpants were indeed too large, rolling at the waist and ankles. The flannel shirt engulfed her, sleeves falling past her hands until she pushed them up. But the clothes were soft, worn comfortable by repeated washing, and they smelled like wood smoke and something clean, something that whispered of a life lived differently than hers. She emerged from the bathroom to find James at the kitchen stove, Ava bouncing in her chair at the table, both of them engaged in the kind of easy conversation that spoke of routine, of family, of knowing each other so completely that communication required no performance. "Dad, that edge is burning." I know. You like them crispy on the edges, right?" Ava nodded enthusiastically, then spotted Sophia in the doorway. Her face lit up with genuine delight. "Good morning, Princess Sophia. Did Mr. Hoppy help you sleep?" Sophia blinked, confused, until she realized the little girl was asking about something that hadn't happened yet. Then James was sliding a plate across the table. Not dinner, but breakfast somehow. Pancakes, slightly misshapen, one edge darker than restaurant perfect, but made with obvious care. "Hope you like maple syrup." James's voice carried a hint of self-deprecation. "Real stuff, not the corn syrup. My one breakfast extravagance." Sophia sat, moving on autopilot, too exhausted and overwhelmed to do anything but accept what was being offered. The pancake was warm, the syrup sweet, and somewhere between the first bite and the second, she realized she was crying. Not the delicate tears that were acceptable at charity galas or wedding proposals, but the ugly, gasping sobs of someone who'd held everything together for so long that falling apart felt like relief. James and Ava said nothing, just let her cry, and somehow that made it both better and worse. Better because they didn't try to fix her or make her explain. Worse because their acceptance of her breakdown made it impossible to pretend she was fine, that she had everything under control, that she was the successful CEO who had it all figured out. After a while, the sobs subsided into hiccups, then silence. Sophia wiped her face with the back of her hand, aware of how she must look. No makeup, crying, wearing a stranger's clothes in a stranger's home, because her own life had become unlivable. "I'm sorry," she managed finally. James shook his head, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "Nothing to apologize for. Sometimes people need to fall apart. That's how they put themselves back together differently." The words settled into her chest, simple and profound. He wasn't talking about her, or maybe he was talking about himself. Or maybe it didn't matter because the truth existed independent of its speaker. Ava slid down from her chair and disappeared down the hallway. She returned moments later, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, its fur matted from years of love, one ear slightly askew. "This is Mr. Hoppy. He makes me feel better when I'm sad. You can borrow him tonight." Sophia took the rabbit with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the simple generosity of a 7-year-old offering her most precious possession to a stranger. When was the last time someone had given her something without expecting something in return? Without calculating the transactional value, the strategic advantage, the return on investment? "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll take very good care of him." Ava beamed, satisfied, then yawned widely. James checked his watch. "Way past bedtime, Squirt. Go brush your teeth." The little girl obeyed without protest, clearly exhausted from the long evening. James followed her down the hallway, leaving Sophia alone in the kitchen with her cold pancakes and borrowed rabbit, and the crushing weight of realizing that this apartment, small, humble, filled with evidence of loss and survival and simple love, felt more like home than her penthouse had in 3 years of ownership. She heard James's voice drifting from the bedroom, low and soothing, reading a bedtime story with the practiced cadence of ritual. Ava's sleepy questions, the rustle of blankets, the click of a nightlight switching on. The ordinary sounds of a family existing, continuing, surviving despite everything that had tried to break them. When James returned, he moved with quiet efficiency, clearing dishes, wiping down counters, performing the mundane tasks that made life livable. Sophia watched him, this stranger who'd opened his home to her without hesitation, who'd shown her more kindness in 2 hours than anyone in her carefully curated network had shown in years. "Why did you help me?" The question emerged before she could stop it. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." James paused, dish towel in hand, considering his answer with the same thoughtfulness he seemed to bring to everything. "Because someone needed help. That's reason enough. Most people would have walked past. Most people aren't responsible for teaching a 7-year-old what it means to be human." He glanced toward the hallway, toward the room where his daughter slept. "I want her to grow up knowing that helping people isn't optional. It's who we are. Or who we should be anyway." Sophia studied him in the kitchen's dim light. This man who'd pulled her from the rain and fed her pancakes and offered his dead wife's clothes without expectation of gratitude or repayment. He looked tired, she realized. Not just tonight tired, but bone-deep exhausted. The kind that came from carrying weight that never got lighter, just familiar. "Are you always this good?" He laughed quietly, the sound devoid of humor. "Not even close. But I try to be the person I want Ava to become. Some days I do better than others." He put on a kettle for tea, moving with practiced efficiency in the small space. "Would you like to tell me what happened tonight? No pressure if you don't." Sophia twisted the engagement ring on her finger, feeling its weight for the first time in months. 4 carats of diamond, flawless clarity, set in platinum. Derek had chosen it personally, made sure it was impressive enough to generate the right kind of attention at the right kinds of parties. She'd worn it as armor, proof that she was wanted, that she'd achieved the kind of life that came with proposals at exclusive restaurants and announcements at charity galas. Now it just felt heavy. The story came out in fragments, disconnected pieces that James didn't push her to connect. The gala, the announcement, Derek's hand on her wrist, the bars, the rain. She left out names, left out the scale of what she stood to lose, left out everything that would make her situation understandable to someone who'd probably never signed a contract worth more than a year's salary. But somehow, James understood anyway. Not the specifics, but the essential truth beneath them. That she'd built a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt like prison from within. That success could be its own kind of trap. That sometimes the hardest thing to escape was a cage you'd built for yourself. "You're welcome to the couch tonight," he said when she'd run out of words. "We can figure out the rest in the morning." Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. James produced a wool blanket, worn soft with age, and a pillow that smelled like lavender. He said goodnight with the same matter-of-fact kindness he'd shown all evening. No judgment, no advice, just simple acceptance of a situation that required nothing more than basic human decency. After he disappeared down the hallway, Sophia lay on the couch clutching Mr. Hoppy and listening to the rain pound the windows. Her phone buzzed once more in her clutch. Probably Derek, probably threatening her with consequences that seemed impossibly far away right now. She silenced it and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she slept without nightmares. Morning light filtered through thin curtains, casting patterns across unfamiliar walls. Sophia blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the absence of her floor-to-ceiling windows and the sweeping view of Elliott Bay. The couch beneath her was lumpy, the blanket scratchy, and her back ached from sleeping in one position too long. But she'd slept through the night without jerking awake at 3 a.m., heart racing, mind already churning through the day's crises. Mr. Hoppy sat on the coffee table where she'd placed him before sleep, his button eyes somehow knowing. Sophia reached for her clutch, pulled out her phone with the dread of someone checking test results they knew would be bad. The screen lit up with notifications that scrolled beyond counting. 73 missed calls, 58 text messages, 12 voicemails. Derek's messages progressed through predictable stages: concern, confusion, anger, threats. The most recent, sent at 4 a.m., carried the cold precision of a man who'd moved past emotion into strategy. Board meeting 9 a.m. Your absence will be noted. Consequences discussed. This is your last chance to salvage what we've built. Sarah's texts were more frantic, underlaid with genuine worry. Miss Mitchell, please respond. Board members asking questions. Derek is spinning this badly. Need you to call. Please. Harold Chen, the oldest board member, had left a voicemail that Sophia played on low volume. Sophia, this behavior is unacceptable. We've invested significant capital based on assurances of stable leadership. Walking out of your own event raises serious questions about your judgment. Call me immediately. She silenced the phone and set it face down, a small act of rebellion that felt both liberating and terrifying. Sounds from the kitchen drew her attention. The clink of dishes, the low murmur of voices. Sophia stood, wincing as her body protested, and padded toward the doorway in her borrowed clothes. James stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with one hand while pouring milk with the other. Ava bounced in her chair, already dressed in her school uniform, hair pulled into 2 puffs that suggested James's attempt at styling had involved more determination than skill. The edge is burning again, Dad. Character building. That's what we're calling it. Ava giggled, then spotted Sophia in the doorway, her face transformed with delight. Good morning, Princess Sophia. Did you sleep good? Did Mr. Hoppy help? The child's enthusiasm felt like sunlight after months of darkness. Sophia found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in longer than she could track. He did. Thank you for lending him to me. James glanced over his shoulder, assessing her with the quick competence of someone trained to evaluate situations rapidly. Whatever he saw made him nod slightly. Coffee's fresh. Mugs are in the cabinet above the sink. Sophia poured coffee into a chipped mug that proclaimed "World's Best Dad" in faded letters, the kind of gift children gave fathers with pure hearts and limited budgets. The coffee was strong, slightly bitter, nothing like the expensive single-origin beans her personal barista prepared each morning. It tasted better than anything she'd had in months. She joined them at the table, accepting the plate James slid toward her. 3 pancakes, edges crispy as Ava preferred. Real maple syrup pooled in the center. The domesticity of the scene felt surreal. She'd eaten breakfast alone for so long that sharing a table with other humans, listening to their conversation, being included in their morning routine, felt like visiting another planet where the gravity operated differently. Ava chattered about her upcoming day, spelling test, recess with her best friend Maya, art class where they were making Mother's Day cards, even though it was only April, because Miss Henderson liked to plan ahead. She spoke with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a child who expected adults to care about every detail of her world, who hadn't yet learned that most people were too absorbed in their own concerns to truly listen. James listened with full attention, asking questions, offering encouragement, the kind of present parenting Sophia had only witnessed from a distance. Her own parents had outsourced child-rearing to nannies and boarding schools, appearing primarily for milestone events that could be photographed and used as evidence of successful family life. The memory surfaced without invitation. Her 8th grade graduation, standing on stage receiving the Academic Excellence Award, scanning the audience for her parents' faces, finding their seats empty. Later, her mother's text. "Congratulations, had to fly to Boston for depositions. We'll make it up to you." They never had, and eventually Sophia had stopped expecting them to. "Miss Sophia?" Ava's voice pulled her back. "Are you sad? You got quiet." Sophia realized she'd been gripping her fork hard enough to make her knuckles white. She forced her hand to relax. "Just thinking. Sometimes grown-ups do that." "My dad thinks a lot too, especially when he looks at pictures of Mommy." The statement hung in the air, simple and devastating. James's expression didn't change, but Sophia saw something flicker behind his eyes. Grief that had become a familiar companion rather than an acute wound, always present but no longer shocking. "Finish your breakfast, Ava. We need to leave in 10 minutes. The rest of the meal passed in companionable quiet, punctuated by Ava's occasional observations. When they'd finished, James began clearing dishes with practiced efficiency. Sophia stood to help, but he waved her off. "You're a guest. Guests don't do dishes." "I think I forfeited guest status when I crashed here wearing someone else's clothes and carrying a stuffed rabbit." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair point. Dish towels in the drawer by the sink." They worked in synchronized silence, James washing, Sophia drying, Ava gathering her school supplies with the focused determination of a child who'd learned responsibility young. The rhythm felt comfortable in a way that shouldn't have been possible between strangers, but somehow was. James's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, frowned slightly, then pocketed it without responding. Sophia wondered what crisis existed in his life, what demands were being made on his time, what pressures he carried that he kept carefully compartmentalized away from his daughter's awareness. "We walk Ava to school," he said, draping the dish towel over the oven handle. "If you want to come along, or you can stay here, make calls, figure out your next steps. No judgment either way." Sophia thought about her phone, about the messages accumulating like debt she'd eventually have to pay. Thought about Derek and the board meeting and the empire she'd built that might be crumbling while she stood in a stranger's kitchen drying mismatched plates. "I'd like to walk with you, if that's okay." James nodded, already moving to help Ava into her backpack. "We leave in 5. Sophia used the bathroom to splash water on her face, smooth her hair into something approximating presentable. Without makeup, she looked younger than 32, or maybe just more honest. The woman in the mirror bore little resemblance to the polished CEO who'd stood on the gala stage 24 hours ago. That woman had been a performance. This one, rumpled and uncertain, felt uncomfortably real. She emerged to find James holding his worn leather jacket and a purple windbreaker. This was Rebecca's. Might be small, but it's better than nothing. Sophia accepted the jacket, struck by the intimacy of wearing a dead woman's clothes, of being trusted with artifacts that surely held memories James hadn't fully processed. The jacket fit reasonably well, sleeves a bit short but the body warm, carrying a faint scent of vanilla and something floral that suggested its previous owner had been someone who cared about small pleasures. They descended the stairs and stepped into a Seattle morning washed clean by last night's rain. The neighborhood revealed itself in daylight. Modest homes and small businesses, corner markets with hand-painted signs, a coffee shop where the line stretched out the door despite the early hour. People nodded greetings to James, some offering curious glances at Sophia, speculation evident but unspoken. Ava walked between them, occasionally taking both their hands to swing herself forward, chattering about the test she'd studied for and how she hoped there would be tacos for lunch because Thursday was usually taco day, but sometimes the cafeteria changed things without warning, and that was frustrating when you'd been looking forward to tacos all week. Sophia found herself relaxing into the rhythm of their pace, the normalcy of a morning walk, the absence of agenda or performance or calculation. When was the last time she'd walked anywhere without a destination determined by professional necessity? Years, probably. She moved through the world in town cars and Ubers, from one appointment to the next, time too valuable to waste on the inefficiency of putting one foot in front of the other. But walking with James and Ava, she understood what she'd been missing. The way morning light slanted between buildings, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery they passed, the elderly woman watering plants on her stoop who called out, "Morning, James! Who's your friend?" "Just helping someone out, Mrs. Patterson." "You're a good man, James Washington. Your mama raised you right." They continued walking, and Sophia found herself curious about the history embedded in this neighborhood, the relationships James had built, the life he'd constructed after loss that seemed fuller than her own despite having a fraction of the resources. "How long have you lived here?" 3 years. After the fire, we needed a fresh start. New place, new memories." The fire. He mentioned it casually, but Sophia heard the weight beneath the words. She wanted to ask more, but Ava was slowing down, looking up at her with the assessing gaze of a child who saw more than adults gave her credit for. "You don't have to be sad about Mommy. Daddy says she's in heaven watching us, and heaven people want us to be happy, not sad all the time." The theology was simple, probably inadequate for processing genuine grief, but delivered with such earnest conviction that Sophia felt her throat tighten. "That sounds like good advice." "It is." "Daddy's really smart. He used to fight fires and save people. Now, he makes furniture and saves different people." James made a sound that might have been embarrassment or might have been suppressed laughter. "Ava, I don't think—" "It's true. You saved Princess Sophia from the rain. That's saving." They reached the school, a brick building that had probably stood since the 50s, playground equipment showing signs of decades of use but maintained with obvious care. Children streamed through the gates, parents calling reminders about lunches and homework, the organized chaos of an elementary school morning. Ava hugged James with the unself-conscious affection of a child secure in her parents' love, then surprised Sophia by hugging her too, small arms wrapping around her waist with surprising strength. "Will you still be at our house when I get home?" The question landed with unexpected force. Sophia glanced at James, seeking guidance, but his expression remained carefully neutral, leaving the choice entirely to her. "I'm not sure, sweetheart, but thank you for sharing Mr. Hoppy with me." Ava beamed, apparently satisfied with the non-answer, and skipped toward the school entrance where her friend Maya waited. The two girls immediately began an animated conversation, hands gesturing wildly, the intensity of 7-year-old friendship on full display. James and Sophia stood at the fence, watching until Ava disappeared inside. The silence between them felt heavier now, weighted with the reality that whatever happened next would involve decisions neither of them were fully prepared to make. "She's remarkable. She's the only thing I got right." James started walking back the way they'd come. "Everything else is just figuring it out as I go." Sophia fell into step beside him, wondering if he knew how fortunate he was to have gotten the one thing right that actually mattered. "Can I ask what happened? With the fire?" His stride didn't falter, but something in his posture shifted, muscles tensing in preparation for pain that never quite stopped hurting. "Old apartment building. Faulty wiring. I was first shift at the station, came home at 2 a.m. to find my building burning." They walked another block before he continued, each word carefully chosen, emotion held in check through practice rather than absence. Rebecca had gone back for Ava's baby blanket. Family heirloom. Her grandmother made it. I got Ava out first, handed her to my captain. Went back for Rebecca. He stopped at a corner, waiting for the light to change, even though no cars were coming, needing the structure of rules to hold himself together. Found her near the stairwell. Smoke inhalation. She looked at me and said, "Promise me. Raise her strong." Then she was gone. The light changed. They crossed. I quit the department the next day. Couldn't do it anymore. Every fire, every call, I saw Rebecca's face. Heard Ava crying for her mama. Realized that saving strangers didn't matter if I couldn't save my own family. Sophia didn't offer platitudes or reassurances, didn't try to fill the silence with words that would ring hollow. She just walked beside him, bearing witness to his grief in the only way that mattered, by acknowledging its weight without trying to diminish it. They turned onto his street, and James seemed to shake himself free from the memory. "That's why I helped you last night. Because someone helped Rebecca once, in the rain. Gave her an umbrella, made sure she got home safe. And because I want Ava to understand that we help people, even when it's inconvenient. Especially then." A man's strength isn't what he can carry out of a fire. It's what he keeps carrying every day after. The thought formed without permission, and Sophia understood she was seeing something most people never witnessed. The daily heroism of survival, of waking up and making pancakes and walking your daughter to school when everything inside you wants to collapse. They reached his building, climbed the stairs in silence. Inside the apartment, James moved immediately to the kitchen, putting on coffee, wiping down counters that were already clean, needing the familiar routines to ground himself after the conversation's emotional toll. Sophia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw Derek's name, and felt the weight of her own unfinished crisis settle back over her shoulders. "I should probably deal with this." James nodded, giving her space by retreating to the small balcony off the living room. Sophia watched him go, envying his ability to simply exist without performance, then forced herself to open Derek's latest message. "Emergency board meeting in 1 hour. Your attendance mandatory. This is your final warning, Sophia. Don't throw everything away over one bad night." She typed back before she could reconsider. "Taking personal time. Reschedule the meeting." His response came immediately. "That's not how this works. You're the CEO. Act like it." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, years of conditioning warring with the fragile new understanding that had taken root overnight. She thought about Ava swinging between them on the walk to school, about James making breakfast with patient care, about sleeping through the night for the first time in 3 years. She thought about who she'd been yesterday and who she might become if she stopped being that person. "I'm taking the time I need. The board can wait." She powered off the phone before he could respond, before the accumulated weight of 73 missed calls could drag her back into the life she'd fled. The phone went dark in her hand, and with it, the immediate connection to everything she'd built. Terror and relief hit simultaneously, indistinguishable from each other. James came back inside, reading her expression with uncomfortable accuracy. "You okay?" "I just told my company they'll have to survive without me for a while, so probably not." He poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. "What do you actually want, Sophia? Not what you think you should want, not what other people expect. What do you want?" The question echoed one Derek had asked months ago during a fight about expansion plans, but James meant it differently. Derek had been challenging her commitment, testing whether she had the ruthlessness required for the next level of growth. James was simply asking, offering space for an honest answer without agenda or judgment. I don't know. The admission came out small, younger than her 32 years. I've wanted success for so long, worked so hard to get here, that I never stopped to ask if success was actually what I wanted, or if I just wanted to prove to my parents that I was worth more than they thought. And did you? Prove it? Sophia laughed, the sound bitter. They still think event planning is frivolous. Not a real profession, my mother called it. This from a woman who billed $400 an hour to argue about contracts. She sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted despite sleeping through the night. I built a company from nothing. Worked 18-hour days, sacrificed relationships, health, any pretense of work-life balance. And for what? To stand on a stage last night while my fiancé announced our wedding date without asking me? To realize that the man I was going to marry sees me as a line item on a balance sheet. James sat in the armchair across from her, giving her space to unravel. Sounds like you built the wrong thing. I built a multi-million-dollar company. Doesn't mean it was the right thing for you to build. The statement hung between them, simple and devastating. Sophia thought about her penthouse with its million-dollar view and its crushing emptiness. Her extensive wardrobe full of power suits she wore like armor. Her calendar packed with meetings and events and strategic dinners where every conversation served a purpose and nothing was said that didn't advance an agenda. She'd built an empire and furnished it with nothing that made life worth living. My workshop's out back. James stood, apparently done with heavy conversation. I've got a custom order that needs finishing. You're welcome to stay here, make calls, do whatever you need. Or come watch wood shavings pile up, your choice. Sophia followed him without consciously deciding to, drawn by curiosity and the need to see what this man created with the scarred hands that had pulled her from the rain. The garage had been converted into a proper workshop, walls lined with tools hung in precise order, workbench scarred by years of use, the smell of fresh-cut wood and sawdust thick in the air. Several projects in various stages of completion occupied different corners: a rocking chair with graceful curves, a toy box with hand-carved animals, a set of children's tables that looked destined for a school or library. James moved to the workbench where a partially completed dining table waited. He ran his hand over the surface, checking for rough spots with the kind of attention Sophia usually reserved for contract negotiations. This oak's been drying for 2 years. See the grain? He guided her hand to the wood surface. It tells you where it wants to bend, where it wants to stay straight. You don't force oak to be pine. You work with what it is. Sophia felt the wood's texture under her palm, the way the grain created subtle valleys and ridges, a landscape in miniature. How do you know what it wants to be? You listen. Look at how it grew, what stresses it encountered, where the branches were. Wood doesn't lie. It tells you exactly what it can become if you're patient enough to pay attention. He handed her a piece of sandpaper, positioned her hands correctly on the table's edge. Always with the grain, never against. Let the wood teach you its rhythm. Sophia began sanding, the motion repetitive and strangely meditative. The work required attention, but not strategic thinking. Physical engagement, but not emotional performance. She could feel the wood smoothing under her hands, the transformation happening in tiny increments, patient and inevitable. This is what I do now, James said, working on the opposite side of the table. After the fire, I needed to make things instead of watch them burn. Needed to know that something I touched would last longer than the shift I worked. They sanded in comfortable silence, sawdust motes catching the light streaming through the workshop windows. Sophia's shoulders began to ache, her hands to cramp, but she kept working, finding satisfaction in the simplicity of improving something through sustained effort rather than strategic maneuvering. An hour passed, maybe 2. Time felt different here, measured in progress rather than deadlines, in the gradual perfection of a surface rather than the relentless ticking of billable minutes. James finally stepped back, assessing the table with critical eyes. "That's good work. Better than good. You've got a feel for it." Sophia looked at what they'd created together, saw the smooth surface that had been rough when they started, and felt something shift in her chest. This table would last, would sit in someone's dining room for decades, would bear witness to family dinners and homework sessions and quiet moments. She'd built that with her own hands, and it mattered in a way that felt more genuine than any gala she'd organized or client she'd impressed. "Can I ask you something?" The question emerged before she'd fully formed it. "Do you ever regret leaving the fire department? Walking away from something you were good at?" James set down his sanding block, considering the question with his usual thoughtfulness. "Every day. And not at all. Both things are true." He gestured to the workshop around them. "I was a good firefighter, saved lives, made a difference. But after Rebecca died, I wasn't that person anymore. Kept trying to be him, kept showing up at the station, but I was broken in ways that made me dangerous, slow to react, hesitant when I needed to be decisive. Eventually, I had to accept that I couldn't be that version of myself anymore." He picked up a chisel, turning it in his scarred hands. "So I became someone else. Someone who makes furniture. Someone who's home when Ava gets off the school bus. Someone who can't save people from fires, but can make sure his daughter knows she's loved every single day. Is it what I planned? No. But it's what I needed to become to survive. You can't force oak to be pine. You work with what it is." The lesson applied to more than wood, and they both knew it. Sophia's phone powered back on in her pocket. She'd forgotten turning it off was temporary, that it would resurrect itself automatically. The familiar buzz of incoming messages made her stomach clench, Pavlovian response to years of being perpetually on call. She pulled it out, saw the notification count had climbed past 90, and felt the panic rise in her throat. The board meeting had happened. Decisions had been made without her. Her absence had been noted, judged, used as evidence of whatever narrative Derek was spinning. One text from Sarah stood out. "Derek convinced board you're having a breakdown. Emergency restructuring discussion happening now. Please call me. Please." The workshop suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Sophia stumbled toward the door, needing space, needing to breathe, needing to... James caught her elbow, steadying her with gentle firmness. "Breathe. Whatever's happening can wait until you're ready to deal with it." "They're taking my company. The board is meeting right now to discuss removing me as CEO." "Are they taking it? Or are you discovering you don't want to fight for something that's been slowly killing you?" The question cut through her panic like a blade. Sophia stared at him, this carpenter who'd lost everything and rebuilt a life from ash, who'd had the courage to walk away from who he'd been to become who he needed to be. "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore." Then maybe that's your answer. Maybe not knowing is the first step toward figuring out what you actually want, instead of what you think you should want. His phone rang, the sound intrusive in the workshop's peaceful space. James glanced at the screen, frowned, then answered with the efficiency of someone dealing with a problem he'd anticipated. "Yeah, I can be there in an hour." Double the original quote given the timeline. He paused, listening. "No, that's the price for emergency work. Take it or find someone else who can deliver by Friday." He ended the call, already moving to gather tools. "Client crisis. Water damage to a dining set I'm supposed to deliver for a wedding anniversary party this weekend. Need to assess if it's salvageable or if I'm building new from scratch." "You should go. Come with me. Or stay here, door locks automatically, your choice." Sophia looked around the workshop, at the half-finished projects and the tools hung in precise order and the evidence of a life being lived with intention rather than desperation. She thought about her phone buzzing with corporate disasters, about Derek and the board and the company she'd built that was possibly being dismantled while she stood in a stranger's garage. "I'll come," They drove in James's truck, a 15-year-old Ford with a manual transmission and a tape deck that had probably been obsolete when the vehicle rolled off the assembly line. The suspension was shot, the air conditioning made concerning noises, and the whole vehicle smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee. It felt more honest than her Mercedes SUV gathering dust in her building's climate-controlled parking garage. The client lived in Madison Park, one of Seattle's affluent neighborhoods where houses started at $3 million and climbed rapidly into stratospheric territory. The residence they pulled up to was a craftsman-style home that had probably been modest once, but had been expanded and renovated until it sprawled across its lot with the aggressive confidence of old money asserting dominance. James grabbed his tool bag from the truck bed, then paused. Fair warning, the Hendersons are particular, and by particular I mean difficult. But they pay well and on time, so I tolerate the particular. Mrs. Henderson answered the door in tennis whites, clearly interrupted mid-preparation for some court time. She was 60-ish, well-preserved in the way wealthy women achieved through dedication and expensive dermatologists, with a kind of brittle politeness that signaled she considered contractors a necessary inconvenience. James, thank goodness, the water damage is extensive. Her eyes flicked to Sophia, taking in the borrowed clothes and morning rough appearance with barely concealed judgment. And you've brought an assistant? A friend. She's learning the trade. Mrs. Henderson's expression suggested she found this explanation dubious, but chose not to pursue it. She led them through a home that looked staged for a magazine shoot, white furniture that no actual humans could live with comfortably, abstract art selected for investment value, fresh flowers in every room that were probably replaced weekly, whether they'd wilted or not. The damaged dining set sat in a room Mrs. Henderson called the informal dining room, which apparently meant it seated only 8 instead of 12. Water had indeed damaged the table's finish, leaving white rings and warped patches where liquid had penetrated the protective coating. James knelt beside the table, running his hands over the damage with professional assessment. The good news is the structure's sound, the finish is ruined, but the wood underneath is salvageable. I can strip it down, sand it, refinish it, but not by Friday. Mrs. Henderson's face tightened with the expression of someone unaccustomed to being told no. The party is Friday. We have 16 people confirmed. I need this table. Then you need a different table. This one requires minimum 2 weeks to restore properly. Rush it and the finish won't cure correctly. You'll have more problems in 6 months. That's unacceptable. My husband specifically chose you because of your reputation for quality work. Surely you can make an exception. James stood, shouldering his tool bag with the body language of someone preparing to walk away. My reputation exists because I don't make exceptions. I do the work right, or I don't do it at all. 2 weeks, or find someone else. Sophia watched the negotiation with professional interest, recognizing the power dynamics at play. Mrs. Henderson had money, and assumed that meant leverage. James had skill and integrity, and understood those were worth more than her check. He was willing to walk away. That gave him all the power in the room. Mrs. Henderson blinked first. Fine, 2 weeks, but I'll need a replacement table for Friday. Can you recommend someone? Party rental companies have options. Won't be custom, but they'll be functional. He pulled out a business card, wrote a number on the back. Tell them I sent you. They'll take care of you. They left Mrs. Henderson standing in her informal dining room, probably already calculating how to spin needing rental furniture to her guests. In the truck, James was quiet, jaw tight with suppressed emotion. You walked away. Sophia heard the admiration in her own voice. She was offering you money to compromise your standards, and you just walked away. Standards are all I've got. Compromise them, and I'm just another contractor who does whatever the client wants as long as the check clears. I won't be that person. Sophia thought about the compromises she'd made over the years, the slow erosion of principles in service of growth and profit, and the relentless demand to scale. When had she stopped being someone with standards and become someone who rationalized doing whatever was necessary to win? They drove back through neighborhoods that shifted from affluent to working class, the transition marked by smaller homes, older cars, corner markets instead of boutique shops. James pulled up to a bakery with a hand-painted sign and a line of customers stretching out the door despite the late morning hour. Best cinnamon rolls in Seattle. Breakfast was hours ago. Figured you might be hungry. Inside, the smell of fresh bread and sugar and cinnamon wrapped around them like a warm blanket. The woman behind the counter was gray-haired, flour dusting her apron, greeting regulars by name and remembering their usual orders. She smiled when she saw James. The usual, James? And for your friend? 2 cinnamon rolls, Susan, and 2 coffee. They sat at a small table by the window, Sophia cradling the warm pastry and coffee that Susan had poured without needing to ask preferences. The cinnamon roll was enormous, sticky with icing, clearly made by someone who believed in abundance over restraint. Sophia took a bite and felt something close to religious experience. This is incredible. Susan's been baking here for 30 years, owns the building, refuses to expand, says she'd rather make 100 perfect cinnamon rolls than 1,000 mediocre ones. Another lesson embedded in a simple statement: quality over quantity, integrity over growth, being known for excellence in a small sphere rather than mediocrity in a large one. Sophia's phone buzzed. She ignored it. They ate in silence, watching the neighborhood move through its daily rhythms outside the window. A delivery truck unloading supplies, teenagers cutting class, an elderly couple walking hand in hand, moving slowly but together. Thank you, Sophia said finally, for last night, for this morning, for showing me that there are other ways to live. James shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Just basic decency. Nothing special. It felt special to me. Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. Derek. Again. The message preview showed enough. Fine. If you won't come to the meeting comes to you. I have your address. We need to talk. Ice flooded her veins. He's coming here. Derek. He hired someone to find me. James's expression darkened. Your place or mine? He said he has my address, but I'm not at my place, so he must mean... They looked at each other, both arriving at the same conclusion. Derek had tracked her phone, found her location, and was on his way to James's apartment. To confront her, to reclaim his asset, to remind her what happened when she tried to escape. We should go. James was already standing, pulling cash from his wallet. Ava gets home from school in 2 hours. I don't want her walking into whatever scene he's planning. They drove back in tense silence, Sophia's mind racing through scenarios and strategies, old instincts kicking in despite her exhaustion. Derek wouldn't make a scene. He was too controlled for that, too aware of optics and reputation. But he would make his point. Would remind her of everything she stood to lose, would use every tool at his disposal to bring her back under control. She thought about Mrs. Henderson offering James money to compromise his standards, about James walking away without hesitation, about the difference between having principles and having a price. By the time they reached the apartment building, a luxury sedan idled at the curb, black, pristine, ostentatiously expensive. Derek leaned against it in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, arms crossed, expression carefully arranged into concerned fiancé rather than corporate predator. James parked the truck but didn't move to exit. You want me to stay, or give you space? Sophia wanted him to stay, wanted the protection of his presence, the comfort of knowing she wasn't alone. But this confrontation was hers to handle. Space, but not too far. She climbed out of the truck on legs that felt unsteady, forcing herself to walk toward Derek with something approximating confidence. He straightened as she approached, his gaze sweeping over her borrowed clothes and unmade face with an assessment she could read from 10 feet away, cataloging evidence of her breakdown, gathering ammunition for later use. Sophia, thank God. He moved to embrace her, but she stepped back, maintaining distance. His hands dropped, expression shifting to hurt that might have been genuine or might have been performance. With Derek, she could never quite tell. Everyone's been worried sick. The board, your team, your clients. You can't just disappear like that. I needed time. Time? His voice climbed half an octave before he caught himself, smoothed back into reasonable tones. You walked out of your own event, left 300 guests and abandoned obligations. That's not taking time, Sophia. That's having a breakdown. The words landed like slaps, each one carrying the weight of her worst fears about herself. That she was unstable, unreliable, unable to handle the pressure of leadership. That everyone had been right to doubt her, to question whether a woman could really sustain success at this level without eventually cracking. Maybe I am having a breakdown. The admission emerged quieter than she'd intended. Maybe I've been breaking down for years and just didn't notice because I was too busy succeeding. Derek's expression flickered, frustration breaking through concern. This is about last night, the announcement. I get it, okay? I should have consulted you first. But Sophia, we don't have time for consultation. My father is dying. The merger needs to close. The board is already questioning your leadership after this stunt. We need to present a united front. Your father is dying, so you decided to use his death as leverage to force a wedding I never fully agreed to? That's not fair. Isn't it? She heard her voice rising, years of suppressed anger finding expression. You proposed at Canlis in front of 100 people because you knew I couldn't say no publicly. You announced our wedding date at a charity gala for the same reason. Everything you do is calculated for maximum strategic advantage, and I'm tired of being a piece you move around the board. Derek's jaw tightened, businessman replacing fiancé completely. Fine. You want honesty? Here's honesty. Bennett Events was 6 months from bankruptcy when we met. I gave you capital, connections, and credibility. I saved your company. And in return, you gave me partnership rights and an understanding that we were building something together, personally and professionally. That was the deal, Sophia. You knew what you were agreeing to. I agreed to a business partnership. I didn't agree to be purchased. No one's purchasing you. I'm trying to save what we've built before your breakdown destroys it. He gestured toward James's apartment building, disgust barely concealed. Is this what you want? To throw away everything you've worked for to play house with some carpenter in a third-floor walk-up? How long do you think that'll last? A week? A month? Until the novelty wears off and you realize you miss success? The words were designed to cut, and they did, because part of her wondered if he was right, if this fragile peace she'd found was just temporary insanity, escapism that would evaporate when reality reasserted itself. If she was throwing away real success for the fantasy of a simpler life she wasn't actually equipped to live. But then she thought about James walking away from Mrs. Henderson, about standards being all you've got, about choosing integrity over compromise, even when the price was high. I don't know what I want yet, but I know I don't want this anymore. She twisted the engagement ring off her finger, the 4-carat diamond catching afternoon light one last time before she pressed it into Derek's palm. I'm sorry about your father. I'm sorry about the timing. But I can't marry you to save a business deal. I won't. Derek stared at the ring in his hand, genuinely shocked for the first time in their relationship. You're making a massive mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. He closed his hand around the ring, expression hardening into something that would have terrified her yesterday. Today, it just made her tired. The board meets tomorrow. Without you there to defend yourself, they'll vote to restructure leadership. I'll make sure of it. Then that's what happens. You'll lose everything, Sophia. The company you built. The reputation you've spent a decade creating. All of it, gone, because you couldn't handle one difficult conversation. She thought about everything she'd lost already without noticing. The ability to sleep through the night, the capacity for genuine joy, the simple pleasure of making pancakes on a Tuesday morning. Thought about what she might gain if she was brave enough to let go of what was destroying her. Maybe losing everything is the only way to find out what actually matters. Derek opened his car door, paused with one foot inside. This isn't over. You think you can walk away from your responsibilities? From everything we've built together? You're wrong. There will be consequences, Sophia. I promise you that. He drove away with the aggressive precision of someone who always needed the last word. Sophia stood on the sidewalk, watching his taillights disappear around the corner, feeling simultaneously lighter and more terrified than she'd ever felt. James emerged from the truck, having witnessed the entire confrontation from a careful distance. He didn't ask if she was okay or offer false reassurance. He just stood beside her until she was ready to move. I just ended my engagement and probably destroyed my company. Sounds like you set yourself free. They climbed the stairs to his apartment in silence, both processing what had just happened and what it meant. Inside, the space felt different now. Not just a temporary refuge, but a deliberate choice. A place she'd chosen to be instead of somewhere she'd washed up by accident. Her phone buzzed with a new message. Sarah, her assistant. Miss Mitchell, please call me. Important. Sophia called, bracing for the worst. Thank God. Sarah's voice carried relief and panic in equal measure. The board meeting is happening now. Derek's pushing for an emergency vote to remove you as CEO. He's spinning the narrative that you've had a complete breakdown, that you're unfit for leadership, that the company needs stable guidance during the merger. And the board believes him? Some of them. Others are pushing back. But Sophia, there's something else, something you need to know. Silence stretched across the line, heavy with implications. Derek paid me $50,000 to document evidence of your instability. Late arrivals to meeting, the time you cried in your office after a difficult client call. Every moment where you showed any human emotion, he had me record it. He's been building a case against you for months. The betrayal hit harder than Derek's. Sarah had been her assistant for 3 years, someone she'd trusted, mentored, promoted. Someone she'd considered almost a friend in an industry where friendship was a liability. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't do it anymore. He gave me the money, and I took it because I needed it. But then I watched you work yourself into the ground trying to be perfect, trying to prove you deserved the success you'd earned. And I realized you taught me that integrity matters, that how you achieve something matters as much as what you achieve. And I've been compromising both by helping him. Sarah's voice cracked. I'm resigning, effective immediately, and I'm sending you everything. Emails, recordings, text messages showing Derek's manipulation. It's probably too late to stop the board vote, but at least you'll know the truth about who you were really partnered with. The call ended. Within seconds, files began flooding Sophia's email. Months of documentation showing Derek's calculated campaign to undermine her, to position himself as the stable one, the rational one. The leader the company needed when she inevitably cracked under pressure. He'd been planning this from the beginning. Probably before the beginning. The romance, the proposal, the merger, all of it strategy, every moment calculated toward the ultimate goal of controlling Bennett events while making Sophia believe it was partnership. She'd been so desperate for connection, so starved for affection, that she'd mistaken manipulation for love. James read her expression, didn't ask for details, just handed her a glass of water and sat across from her, present but not intrusive, offering the gift of companionship without demanding explanation. I need to go to this meeting, need to defend myself, or at least go down fighting. Then let's go. This isn't your fight. You're in my home, wearing clothes that belong to my wife, drinking water from my daughter's favorite glass. That makes it my fight too. The simple declaration carried more weight than any contract Sophia had ever signed. James was choosing to stand with her, not because of strategic advantage or transactional benefit, but because she needed help, and he was capable of providing it. The concept felt foreign and precious in equal measure. They had 90 minutes before Ava got home from school. 90 minutes to drive downtown, confront the board, and salvage what could be salvaged from the wreckage of everything Sophia had built. She gathered her things, preparing for battle in borrowed clothes, and with a man she'd known less than 24 hours standing as her only ally. Sometimes, losing everything was the only way to discover what was worth keeping. The Bennett Events headquarters occupied 3 floors of glass and steel in downtown Seattle, a monument to everything Sophia had sacrificed to build. James parked his battered truck in the visitor section, the vehicle looking ridiculous among the Teslas and Mercedes that marked executive territory. Security eyed them with suspicion as they entered. Sophia in borrowed clothes, James in work boots still dusted with sawdust, both of them carrying the disheveled appearance of people who'd stopped caring about corporate theater. The lobby fell silent as Sophia crossed toward the elevators. Employees stared, whispered, phones appearing to document her arrival. She'd been absent 36 hours, and in that time, she'd become a spectacle. The fallen CEO, the woman who'd cracked under pressure. Evidence that women couldn't handle the demands of leadership without eventually breaking. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt interminable. James, a solid presence beside her, asking no questions, offering no advice, just standing close enough that his shoulder brushed hers, a reminder that she wasn't alone, even if she was outmatched. The doors opened onto the executive floor, where Sarah waited, laptop clutched to her chest like armor. Her eyes were red-rimmed, makeup smudged, carrying the appearance of someone who'd cried recently and might start again without warning. "Miss Mitchell, I'm so sorry. For everything." Sophia wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at the betrayal, but looking at Sarah's devastated expression, she found only exhaustion. "How bad is it?" "Derek's been speaking for 40 minutes. He's painted you as unstable, emotionally compromised, unable to handle the demands of leadership during a critical growth phase. Half the board is sympathetic. The other half is concerned about liability and shareholder confidence. And the vote? Scheduled for 5 minutes from now, unless you object." James's hand found the small of her back, steadying pressure that somehow transferred certainty she didn't possess. "Then let's object." The conference room doors stood closed, voices murmuring within, her board discussing her future without her presence, deciding whether she deserved to keep what she'd built. Sophia straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and pushed through the doors with the kind of entrance she'd perfected over a decade of walking into rooms where men expected her to fail. 8 board members sat around the polished table, Derek at the head where she usually presided, legal counsel flanking him with the grim efficiency of executioners sharpening blades. Conversation died as she entered, every face turning toward her with expressions ranging from relief to hostility to something that might have been pity. Harold Chen, the oldest member and earliest investor, recovered first. "Sophia, we weren't certain you'd attend. Apparently, you were prepared to make decisions about my company without me. Seems I arrived just in time." Derek's expression remained carefully neutral, but she saw calculation in his eyes, strategy adjusting in real time to accommodate her unexpected appearance. "Sophia, I'm glad you're here. This meeting was never about excluding you. We've been concerned about your well-being, and your absence only reinforced those concerns." "My well-being. Is that what we're calling it?" She moved to the empty chair beside Harold, refusing to acknowledge Derek's attempt to control the room's geography. James remained by the door, arms crossed, projecting the kind of quiet menace that came from years of walking into burning buildings. His presence drew curious glances, but no one asked who he was or why he'd accompanied her. Harold cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with his role as de facto moderator. "Sophia, while we appreciate your contributions to Bennett Events, your recent behavior has raised serious questions about judgment and stability. Walking out of your own flagship event without explanation, disappearing for over 30 hours, ignoring communications from this board and from clients. Frankly, it appears you've had some sort of breakdown." The words landed with clinical precision, each one a scalpel cutting away at her credibility. Sophia forced herself to breathe, to think, to remember that she'd survived worse than a boardroom ambush. "You're right. I did have a breakdown. I broke down the fake version of myself I'd built to meet everyone's expectations. And I found something real underneath." Confusion rippled around the table. This wasn't the script they'd anticipated. The defensive CEO scrambling to justify her behavior, apologizing for her weakness, promising to do better. Derek's jaw tightened, recognizing that she'd changed the game somehow. With respect, Sophia, finding yourself isn't a business strategy. This from Marcus Webb, a tech investor who joined the board 6 months ago, specifically because of the Morrison Capital merger. We have fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders. Personal crises, while unfortunate, don't excuse abandoning professional obligations. You're absolutely right. Personal crises don't excuse abandonment, but they do require honesty about what we're actually building and why. She stood, needing to move, to claim space in a room designed to make her feel small. I started Bennett Events 10 years ago with nothing but ambition and a maxed-out credit card. Built it into a multi-million-dollar company by working 18-hour days, sacrificing relationships and health and any semblance of work-life balance. I did everything you're supposed to do to succeed. And you know what I discovered? Success without meaning is just expensive misery. Derek leaned forward, voice carrying the patronizing patience of someone explaining reality to a child. Sophia, we're all tired sometimes. The demands of leadership are exhausting. But walking away isn't the answer. We can restructure your responsibilities, bring in additional support. I'm not asking to walk away. I'm proposing we restructure the entire company. Silence crashed through the room. She pulled up the presentation she'd sketched on her phone during the drive downtown, airplaying it to the conference room screen. The design was rough, hastily assembled, but the vision was clear. Bennett Events splits into 2 divisions. Bennett Corporate continues the high-end event model, galas, corporate conferences, celebrity weddings. Focus on profit maximization and aggressive growth. Derek assumes CEO responsibilities for this division, which aligns with Morrison Capital's investment thesis and his expertise. Derek's expression flickered, suspicion warring with interest. This wasn't the fight he'd anticipated. Bennett Community becomes a separate entity focused on local impact, neighborhood events, nonprofit fundraisers, community building initiatives. Smaller scale, lower margins, but meaningful work that actually improves people's lives. I lead this division with reduced board oversight and independent operational authority. Harold frowned, clearly trying to identify the trap. You're proposing to give up control of the company's primary revenue stream? I'm proposing we both build what we're actually suited to build. Derek wants empire. I want impact. Those aren't the same thing, and pretending they are has been slowly destroying both of us. She pulled up financial projections, rough estimates based on existing client data and market analysis. Corporate division retains 80% of current revenue but requires minimal new infrastructure. Community division starts small but has growth potential in an underserved market. Both divisions share brand recognition and back-office resources, reducing redundancy. Total company value actually increases through strategic positioning. The board members leaned in, studying the numbers with the hungry attention of investors spotting opportunity. This was language they understood: revenue streams and market positioning and strategic advantage. Not emotions or breakdowns or personal crises, but cold calculation about maximizing return. Derek stood, moving to the screen, examining her proposal with intensity that suggested genuine interest rather than performance. What's the equity split? I retain 40% of the overall company. You control 35% through Morrison Capital's existing holdings. The board manages the remaining 25%. We're partners, but we stop pretending to be more than that. She pulled the engagement ring from her pocket. She'd taken it back from Derek during their confrontation, some instinct telling her it might be useful as a symbol. She set it on the conference table, the diamond catching fluorescent light. 4 carats of strategic mistake. No more using our personal relationship to blur professional boundaries. No more merger between our lives that was really just Derek acquiring another asset. We build separate companies under a shared brand, and we do it honestly. Derek stared at the ring, something raw flickering across his features. before the mask slammed back into place. When he spoke, his voice carried an emotion she couldn't quite identify. Possibly respect, possibly anger, possibly relief. My father died yesterday morning. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I got the call during the board meeting I'd scheduled to remove you as CEO. The revelation stunned the room into silence. Sophia felt something twist in her chest, not love, but the ghost of what might have been affection if they'd both been different people. Derek, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't tell you. Didn't tell anyone. Morrison men don't show weakness. Don't let personal tragedy interfere with business obligations. That's what he taught me. That's who I became. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the ring, turning it in his fingers. But standing at his grave this morning, alone because I'd pushed away everyone who might have stood with me, I understood something. He built an empire. Died with no one holding his hand, just lawyers and accountants and business associates, paying respects to a man they'd feared, but never loved. He looked at Sophia directly, walls dropping for the first time in their entire relationship. You were right to leave. Right to refuse the merger I was trying to force. I would have made you as miserable as he made my mother. And I would have called it success because the quarterly reports looked good. The honesty in the statement carried more weight than any strategic posturing could have achieved. Around the table, board members shifted uncomfortably, witnessing something too raw for corporate settings. I accept your proposal. Derek set the ring in front of her, pushing it across the polished wood. Build your community division. Make it mean something. And I'll build the empire. Maybe we'll both sleep better knowing we're doing what we're actually suited for. Harold looked between them, clearly trying to determine if this was genuine reconciliation or elaborate corporate theater. The board would need to approve this restructuring. It represents a significant departure from our current trajectory. Then let's vote. Sophia remained standing, refusing to sit while her future hung in balance. All in favor of the proposed two-division structure? Hands rose around the table. 6 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 opposed. The margin felt impossibly slim for something that would reshape her entire existence. But it was enough. Motion carries. Harold made a note in his leather portfolio. We'll need legal counsel to draft the specifics, but in principle, the board approves the restructuring. Relief crashed through Sophia so forcefully she had to grip the table edge for stability. James moved from his position by the door, crossing to stand beside her, presence somehow making the victory feel real rather than hallucinatory. Derek stood, gathering his materials with the efficient precision of someone who'd gotten what he came for. He paused beside Sophia, voice low enough that only she could hear. For what it's worth, I did love you. I just didn't know how to love you without trying to own you. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry about your father. He would have liked this outcome. The clean division, the strategic positioning. He appreciated elegant solutions to complicated problems. They shook hands, the gesture carrying finality, not enemies, but no longer partners in anything that mattered. Derek left without looking back, shoulders squared despite the fresh grief he carried, already mentally pivoting to the next quarter's strategy. The remaining board members filed out, offering congratulations that felt hollow but necessary. Sarah appeared in the doorway, laptop still clutched protectively, mascara smudged beyond repair. I meant what I said. I'm resigning. I can't work here knowing what I did, even if you forgive me. Sophia studied the young woman who'd betrayed her for $50,000 and guilt. Seeing her own younger self in the desperate need for financial security, the willingness to compromise principles when the price was high enough. Don't resign. Transfer to Bennett Community. We'll need someone who understands operations and isn't afraid to make hard choices. Even if those choices were wrong, at least you had the courage to admit it. Sarah blinked, tears spilling over. You're offering me a job? After everything? I'm offering you a second chance. What you do with it is up to you. After Sarah left, Sophia sank into a chair, the adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation evaporating and leaving only exhaustion. James sat beside her, saying nothing, just existing in the space with the comfortable silence of someone who didn't need words to communicate support. I just gave away my company. You gave away the part that was killing you. Kept the part that might let you breathe. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harold. Well played. Your father would be proud, even if he'd never admit it. The observation stung because it was probably true and definitely irrelevant. She'd stopped building things to earn her parents' approval years ago. But somehow, their judgment still echoed in every major decision. Ghost voices she couldn't quite silence. We should go. Ava gets out of school in 20 minutes. Right. The world beyond boardrooms and corporate restructuring continued existing. Children still needed to be picked up from school. Dinner still needed to be cooked. Life still demanded attention to its mundane requirements, even while everything else transformed. They drove back through traffic that felt surreal after the intensity of the board meeting, radio playing country songs James hummed along with, the ordinariness of it somehow exactly what Sophia needed. No analysis, no strategy, no performance. Just a man driving his truck and a woman processing what she'd just survived. Greenwood Elementary's parking lot was already filling with parents and caregivers, the daily ritual of pickup proceeding with familiar choreography. James pulled into his usual spot, turned off the engine, then looked at Sophia with unexpected intensity. You did something brave back there. Not the restructuring proposal, though that was smart, but telling the truth about what you actually wanted instead of defending what you thought you were supposed to want. That takes more courage than most people ever manage. Before she could respond, before she could process the compliment or deflect it with self-deprecation, Ava came running across the parking lot, backpack bouncing, face alight with the uncomplicated joy of 7-year-old enthusiasm. Daddy! Princess Sophia! You came together! James caught his daughter as she launched herself at him, spinning her once before setting her down. How was school, Squirt? We learned about butterflies. Did you know they used to be caterpillars, but then they go into a cocoon and transform into something completely different? Miss Henderson said it's called metamorphosis, and it's like magic, but it's actually science. Sophia felt the parallel land with unexpected force. Transformation, becoming something completely different. The magic that was actually just biology and courage and the willingness to dissolve everything familiar in hope of emerging changed. During the walk home, Ava chattered about butterflies and spelling tests and how Maya had shared her cookies at lunch because Ava had forgotten hers. James listened with complete attention, asking questions that proved he actually cared about the answers. The kind of parenting Sophia had observed from a distance, but never experienced firsthand. Back at the apartment, Ava immediately colonized the kitchen table with homework, while James started dinner preparations. Sophia found herself hovering in the doorway, unsure of her place in this established routine, uncertain whether she belonged or was intruding. You can help or sit. Your choice. But standing in the doorway looking lost isn't an option. James's tone was matter-of-fact, neither welcoming nor dismissive, just acknowledging her presence and offering inclusion. Sophia chose helping, following his directions for chopping vegetables, the physical task grounding after the emotional turbulence of the afternoon. They worked in synchronized silence, broken only by Ava's occasional questions about her homework. How to spell metamorphosis, whether butterflies remembered being caterpillars, if people could transform like that too. James answered each question seriously, treating his daughter's curiosity with the respect it deserved. Dinner was simple: pasta with vegetables, garlic bread, salad from a bag that claimed to be pre-washed, but James rinsed anyway. They ate at the handmade table, Ava narrating her day with dramatic flair, James interjecting corrections when her storytelling got too creative with facts. Sophia watched them, this father and daughter who'd survived loss and built a life from ruins, and felt something shift in her chest. Not love, exactly. Too soon for that, too complicated. But recognition. The sense of having found something she hadn't known she was looking for. After dinner, After dishes were washed and homework reviewed, and Ava convinced to take a bath despite vocal protests, James retreated to the balcony with 2 mugs of tea. Sophia followed, the evening air carrying Seattle's distinctive smell of salt water and rain, even though the sky was clear. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate for everything he'd done, everything he'd witnessed, everything he'd allowed her to become in his space. For letting me stay. For driving me downtown, for just being steady when everything else was chaos. James shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "You needed help. I had room. It's not complicated." "It feels complicated. Most things do when we overthink them." They stood in silence, watching the neighborhood settle into evening, lights flickering on in apartment windows, voices carrying from nearby units, the distant sound of traffic like an ocean's perpetual rhythm. Sophia thought about her penthouse standing empty, about the life she'd fled that was still technically hers, waiting for her to return and resume performance. "I need to figure out where I'm going. Can't keep sleeping on your couch." "Why not?" The question landed with unexpected weight. James turned to face her, expression serious in a way she hadn't seen before, walls dropping to reveal something raw underneath. "I know this is fast. No, we barely know each other beyond crisis management and pancake preferences. But Sophia, you fit here. In this apartment, in this life, in the space beside Ava and me. And I think you know it too. Which is why you're looking for excuses to leave before you have to admit that maybe the life you thought you wanted isn't the life you actually need." Her throat tightened, words refusing to form. Because he was right. She'd been constructing exit strategies since waking up this morning, planning her return to normalcy, to the penthouse and the power suits and the carefully managed persona that everyone expected. But standing on this balcony, wearing borrowed clothes, hands still carrying the smell of garlic from chopping vegetables, she couldn't remember why that life had seemed necessary. Couldn't identify what she'd been trying to prove or who she'd been trying to impress. "I'm terrified." The admission emerged small, younger than her 32 years. Terrified of staying, terrified of leaving. Terrified that this is just escapism and I'll wake up in a week hating everything about this life. Terrified that it's not escapism and I've wasted a decade building the wrong thing. James stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cooling evening air. Being terrified means you're doing something that matters. Comfortable things don't scare us. Only the important stuff does. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back, but she didn't. His hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness, calloused palm against her cheek, thumb brushing the spot where tears had dried hours ago. "I'm falling in love with you. Completely, terrifyingly in love with someone I met 36 hours ago in the rain. That should feel insane. But it feels like the first sane thing I've done in 3 years." Sophia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, feeling the steadiness of him anchor her when everything else spun. "I don't know how to do this. Don't know how to be in a relationship that isn't transactional or strategic or carefully calculated for mutual benefit." "Then we figure it out together, day by day. No strategy, no calculation. Just 2 people choosing each other because being together feels better than being apart." She opened her eyes, found him watching her with patience that had no deadline, no ultimatum, no demand for immediate decision. Just space for her to arrive at whatever truth she needed. "Okay." The word came out barely a whisper. "Okay. Let's try." He kissed her then, slow and careful, asking permission with every movement. Sophia felt herself melting into it. The kiss nothing like Derek's calculated affection, or the handful of previous relationships that had served specific purposes at specific times. This was just connection. Just 2 people deciding that whatever terror came with trying was worth the alternative of walking away. When they separated, Ava's voice drifted from the bathroom. "Daddy, I'm ready for my story." Real life reasserting itself, demanding attention, refusing to pause for romantic moments. James smiled, the expression transforming his face from handsome to beautiful. "Bedtime story duty. You're welcome to join, but fair warning, she makes me read the same book 3 times with different voices for each character." Sophia followed him inside, heart pounding with a mixture of terror and anticipation. The bedtime routine felt sacred. Ava in princess pajamas, hair damp from the bath, Mr. Hoppy clutched in the crook of her arm. James read with dramatic flair, doing voices that made Ava giggle, occasionally looking to Sophia for confirmation that he was nailing the dragon's roar. When the story ended, Ava yawned widely, then reached for Sophia's hand. "Will you stay, please? I like having you here." The simple request, delivered with a child's directness, carried more weight than any board meeting or corporate negotiation. Sophia squeezed the small hand in hers, feeling the responsibility of mattering to someone who couldn't be impressed with achievements or credentials or the size of her bank account. "I'll stay tonight. We'll figure out tomorrow when it gets here." Ava accepted this with the pragmatism of children who understood that adults could only promise one day at a time. James tucked her in, turned on the nightlight that projected stars across the ceiling, and they retreated to the living room. "I should get some things from my apartment. Clothes, toiletries, laptop. I can't keep wearing Rebecca's sweatpants." James nodded, tossing her his truck keys. "Take the truck. I'll be here when you get back." The drive to her building felt like visiting a museum exhibiting her former life. Everything familiar but distant, artifacts from someone else's existence. The doorman greeted her with visible relief, probably imagining disasters that explained her absence. She mumbled something about an emergency and escaped to the elevator before he could ask questions. The penthouse stood exactly as she'd left it, pristine, expensive, empty. She moved through rooms that no longer felt like hers, gathering essentials with the efficiency of someone who'd mastered packing for business trips. Clothes appropriate for community organizing rather than corporate galas. Her laptop and files related to Bennett community. The small wooden box she'd made in James's workshop, now holding the engagement ring she'd taken back, not for its value, but as a reminder of what she'd escaped. On impulse, she grabbed the photograph from her desk, the only picture she had of herself genuinely smiling, taken at a neighborhood festival 5 years ago when she'd volunteered for a non-profit event. Before the success, before Derek, before she'd learned to weaponize her smile for strategic advantage. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered hesitantly. "Miss Mitchell? This is Tom Williams. We met briefly at the community garden yesterday morning. James gave me your number. Hope that's okay." The elderly veteran, the one who'd talked about his wife and Sunday dinners and not waiting until it was too late. "Of course. How can I help you?" "Heard through the neighborhood grapevine about your new community division. Wondered if you might be interested in partnering on a veteran support program. Nothing fancy, just monthly gatherings, resource sharing, helping guys who came back changed find their way. I've been trying to organize it for years, but lacking the administrative expertise to make it sustainable." Sophia felt something click into place. The first real project for Bennett community, meaningful work that would actually improve lives rather than just create Instagram moments for wealthy clients. "I'd love to discuss it. Can we?" She took one last look around the penthouse, at the $1,000,000 view and the designer furniture, and the evidence of success that had cost everything worth having. Then she locked the door and walked away without looking back. James was waiting when she returned, reading on the couch, Ava's artwork spread across the coffee table. He looked up as she entered, taking in the suitcase and boxes with an expression that might have been relief, or might have been the kind of happiness that came from watching someone choose you when they had every other option available. "That's a lot of stuff for one night." "I'm a chronic overpacker. It's a problem." He stood, crossing to help with her bags, and she caught his hand instead, pulling him close enough to feel his heartbeat. "Thank you for being patient. For giving me space to figure out what I actually wanted instead of telling me what I should want. You didn't settle by coming back here, Sophia. You came home. There's a difference. The words settled into her chest, true in a way that defied logic or strategic calculation. She'd spent 32 years building success, climbing ladders, proving herself worthy of recognition and respect, and her parents' distant approval. And in 36 hours, she'd discovered that home wasn't a penthouse or a corner office or a board position. Home was a third-floor walk-up and a 7-year-old's drawings and a man who made furniture with scarred hands and believed in showing up for people even when it was inconvenient. 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity, filing paperwork to officially structure Bennett Community, hiring a small team that included Sarah as operations director, meeting with Tom Williams and a dozen other community organizers who'd been waiting for someone with resources and expertise to help scale their grassroots efforts. Sophia moved into the vacant apartment on the first floor of James's building, close enough for daily connection, but separate enough to maintain healthy boundaries. Ava bounced between the two apartments as if they formed a single home, leaving artwork on Sophia's refrigerator and books on James's coffee table, claiming both spaces with the casual confidence of a child who felt completely secure. Derek sent one email, brief and professional, confirming the legal details of their separation, personal and corporate. He'd met someone, he wrote, a teacher who worked with at-risk youth and didn't care about quarterly earnings. He thought maybe Sophia would be happy to know he was learning to build something that wasn't an empire. She was. Her parents didn't call, which felt like blessing rather than abandonment. Their relationship had always been transactional, conditional on her achievements, and she'd finally stopped performing for an audience that would never be satisfied. Bennett Community's first major event was the Veterans Support Program launch. 50 veterans and their families gathering in the community center for dinner, resources, connection. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy, just people showing up for each other, because that's what community meant. Sophia stood at the edge of the room, watching Tom Williams hold court with a group of younger veterans, sharing stories and wisdom, and the hard-won understanding that coming home from war meant finding new ways to serve. James and Ava worked the food table, serving portions with the easy competence of people who'd mastered the art of hospitality. Sarah approached, tablet in hand, grinning with genuine excitement. 3 local nonprofits want to partner with us. A dozen families have asked about neighborhood events. The Seattle Times wants to do a feature on corporate executives choosing community impact over profit maximization. The publicity part made Sophia's stomach clench, old instincts warning that visibility meant vulnerability, that people would judge and criticize and find her wanting. But then she looked at the room full of people connecting, healing, building something meaningful together, and realized she didn't care about critics anymore. Let them judge. She was too busy doing work that mattered. A month after the rainy night that had changed everything, spring erupted across Seattle with characteristic enthusiasm. Cherry blossoms and tulips, the kind of perfect weather that made people forget 9 months of gray. Sophia, James, and Ava drove to Mount Rainier for the day, the first real break Sophia had taken in a decade. They hiked an easy trail, Ava running ahead, then circling back to report discoveries. Interesting rocks, a squirrel, evidence that fairies definitely lived in the forest, and why weren't adults paying attention? James walked beside Sophia, their hands linked with the casual intimacy of people who'd stopped questioning whether they belonged together. I have something to show you. James led them off-trail to a small clearing with views of the mountain, dramatic against the spring sky. From his backpack he pulled a wooden box, handcrafted with the same attention to detail he brought to everything. I've been working on this for 3 weeks. Figured it was time. Sophia opened the box carefully. Inside, nested in velvet, sat a ring, wood inlaid with a thin band of platinum and a small diamond. Nothing like the ostentatious rock Derek had used to claim her. This was simple, beautiful, honest in its construction. It's maple from a tree that fell during that first rainstorm the night we met. I salvaged the wood, dried it, shaped it into something that would last. He knelt, and Sophia felt her breath catch, the moment surreal and perfect and terrifying. Ava bounced on her toes, clearly in on the secret, struggling to contain her excitement. "I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. Too fast, too much pressure. But I'm asking if you'll keep building this life with me, day by day, choosing each other, figuring out what it means to be partners, without transaction or strategy or anything beyond just being together." Sophia dropped to her knees in front of him, eye level, close enough to see the vulnerability in his expression, the fear that she might say no, despite everything they'd built. "Yes, to all of it. To building something real. To choosing you and Ava every single day. To whatever comes next." He slid the ring onto her finger, the wood warm against her skin, the weight of it nothing like the diamond she'd worn before. This ring didn't announce ownership or status or strategic advantage. It just declared that two people had found each other in a storm and decided that what they'd built together mattered more than anything they could build alone. Ava squealed, launching herself at both of them, and they tumbled into the grass, laughing, the mountain watching over them with ancient patience. That evening, they returned to the neighborhood and the community garden where Tom Williams had assembled volunteers to work on expansion. Sophia rolled up her sleeves and dug alongside neighbors she'd come to know. The elderly couple who grew prize tomatoes, the single mother managing 3 kids, the teenager learning carpentry from James. As sunset painted the sky orange and gold, James appeared with the large outdoor table they'd been building in his workshop for weeks. 12 feet of oak, solid enough to last generations, carved with the names of everyone who'd contributed to the garden's growth. They positioned it in the center of the space, and someone brought out potluck dishes, and suddenly 50 people were gathering for an impromptu feast. Sophia found herself seated between James and Ava, surrounded by neighbors who'd become friends, sharing food and stories, and the kind of connection that couldn't be manufactured or optimized or scaled. This wasn't success as she'd understood it. This was something better. Community, belonging, the radical act of showing up for people because you cared about their well-being rather than what they could do for your bottom line. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Saw the Seattle Times piece. Looks like you found what you were looking for. Happy for you." She typed back, "You too. Build something you're proud of." Sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was releasing them from the obligation to be what you needed, freeing them to become who they were meant to be. The meal stretched into evening, children running wild in the garden's paths, adults lingering over wine and conversation, the kind of night that felt suspended outside normal time. Ava eventually climbed into Sophia's lap, tired from the long day but fighting sleep, not wanting to miss anything. "Mama Fia?" The name had emerged naturally over weeks, Ava's solution to the complicated reality that she had a mother in heaven and a mother at the dinner table, both loved in different ways. "Are you staying forever now?" Sophia looked at James over their daughter's head, the man who'd pulled her from the rain and shown her that strength sometimes meant walking away from what you'd built to create space for what you actually needed. He smiled, the expression carrying everything they'd survived and chosen and built together. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm staying." Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Around them, community continued its ancient work, feeding each other, sharing stories, building connection that couldn't be quantified or optimized, but remained the foundation of everything that mattered. Sophia had spent a decade building an empire in the clouds, chasing success that looked impressive from a distance, but felt hollow up close. It had taken one rainy night and the kindness of strangers to learn that home wasn't a place you achieved. It was the people who saw you completely, broken and scared and trying, and chose to stand beside you anyway. She'd been searching for success when what she actually needed was to belong, to matter to people who couldn't be impressed with achievements or credentials, to wake up each morning with purpose that extended beyond quarterly earnings and into the simple, profound work of making the world slightly better than she'd found it. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and patient. The community celebrated around their table. James's hand found hers, calloused and warm and steady. Ava's weight grew heavier as sleep finally claimed her, and Sophia understood, with the clarity that only comes after everything familiar has been stripped away, that this was what she'd been building toward all along. Not the penthouse, or the corner office, or the empire that looked so impressive from the outside. This. Just this. Home.